Okay, stakeholder management. Project stakeholder management's got 4 processes. And we'll see this is initiating, identifying stakeholders. It's kind of funny way at the beginning, we had developed the charter, and the other process in initiation was identifying stakeholders. So we got bookends here on our discussions. It's kind of funny because the way we used to do the class, we would knock out those 2 processes early in initiation. And then we go through a bunch of planning things. It was a little bit more disjointed. We bounced around a little bit more. But, identify stakeholders is the second initiation process. And we're going to plan the plan, manage our stakeholder engagement, and monitor our stakeholder engagement. So here's the, once again, identifying stakeholders is up front. When we're putting the charter together, we probably know a lot of our key people and maybe some of the others that may be involved. And we'll build that out as we're going along. Plan stakeholder engagement, really working, have good plans on how we're going to deal with the various stakeholders. Communication, we mentioned a lot of what we do, 80–90% of what we do is communicate. Well, who are we communicating with? Well, the stakeholders. And that's why those 2 used to be one knowledge area, I think 2 editions ago. But they decided there was enough good stuff in both of them to make them distinct. That being said, though, still, we're communicating with stakeholders. We're engaging with them. We're working with them, answering questions, dealing with issues. So manage stakeholder engagement then will be during our execution phase, making sure we're communicating, keeping in touch with them, meeting their needs, looking for any issues that might come up and addressing those. And then monitoring stakeholder engagement will be looking at how things change as we're going through the project. It seems like in our world nowadays, we just have such churn of people. Well, that's why we're all here, I think, that people may be coming and going if they've left the company or retired. Don't need to engage with them anymore, but we'll probably have new people coming on. Just hired some rookies out of college. Okay, how we're going to work with these right out of college. Would they be considered millennials or post-millennials after that?
I don't know.
Gen X, Gen Y, or?
Yeah, it's one of those Gen X. Millennials are in their 30s, 35.
They're mostly in 30s, yeah. My 3 sons are millennials. They're 30s.
Maybe 25 to 30 is, 25, 35 is millennials. I think under 25 would be Gen
X or,
X, I think.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. The new generation is here.
New generation's here. And the younger generation's here.
Yeah.
They're growing up. So we got these 4 processes, some key concepts. The stakeholder is going to be impacted by this project. And we kind of said that in the definition up front. So maybe one way or another, positive or negative, and they can have an influence on what we're doing. As project manager, we need to identify the various stakeholders, figure out how best to communicate with them. And as it says there, to avoid missed communications and disasters. Stakeholder satisfaction should be one of our main objectives. And obviously the customer, the end user, is probably the key person for that satisfaction. But we probably want to satisfy our sponsor and other key people that are on the project. And we're going to need to figure out, as we're moving along, when do we need to update how we're going to engage with various stakeholders. We got some that were against us at first, and now they're for us. Well, that's going to be a different strategy than treating them like they're still our enemies. Trends, we want to make sure we're identifying all stakeholders, involving all team members in doing this. Kind of like that question we had earlier, if I could come up with 39 stakeholders on my own, I'm probably going to miss the other 40 or 50 that are out there. And a lot of times we're going to be doing things like one of the new things, perhaps more true in agile type projects, is really engaging with the stakeholders, involving them, actually helping them in creating the project. So co-creation is an idea that's become more popular recently. Things to consider, the diversity of our stakeholders. What are the relationships in the community? Are they kind of complex? How do we communicate with them? And are there different tools that are best for communicating with the stakeholders? And in the agile world, we're really trying to bring that team close together, but they also want to keep their key stakeholders close to them too. So that's where they'd have them interacting with them on a regular basis. And in this case, I think they're really talking about the end user, the customer, or sometimes called the product owner, where that person or group of people may be part of the project team or very closely related to them. One of the good things about that is that it helps build more trust, and you're talking together all the time, so your communication should be pretty good. Identifying stakeholders was the first process, though. So people or organizations that might be impacted by this project. So we need to analyze and document any relevant information about the stakeholders, what their expectations are, or interest, involvement, what authority they have, how they can influence us. And we'll be developing different strategies for various people. We want to try to maximize those positive impacts and minimize, reduce any of the resistance we get. And we're going to be doing some matrices coming up, looking at influence and power and influence and involvement and interest. This will help us figure out how best to work with different stakeholders. We can't spend all our time working with all the stakeholders. There may be some that need the daily contact. Their sponsor may need regular updates and things. Others, monthly newsletter maybe, if they're not really highly engaged. So it'll depend on various factors there. We saw this chart way back in our first class, I think, talking about stakeholders and who are stakeholders. Pretty much everybody that could be impacted by this project, and it's everybody except perhaps our competitors. I think that's usually the one group that's usually not a stakeholder. We blurred that at Motorola because we bought hardware from one of our competitors, from Huawei, a Chinese company. But typically, people within the organization, our customers, end users, our vendors, third-party vendors, PMO, program portfolio managers, maybe other stakeholders within the company, and outside groups. Public, for publicly traded companies, stockholders may be interested if it's a very important project.
Shouldn't you get that from your sponsor?
Yeah, which?
Who the stakeholders and...
Sponsor probably knows a good number of them, but they may not know everybody, especially if we're going to get some vendors producing something for us. You may not know exactly which project team members we're going to be pulling in. But yeah, he would know. Sponsor typically would know customers for sure, or potential customers. Yeah, so when we're pulling in identifying those stakeholders, we want to really get everybody involved. Sponsor would be a good person. Maybe our team members know some of the key people and key leads that we've worked with a lot too. So the charter, which was being put together, and here they mentioned some of the parties: the sponsor, customer, team, any departments that might be involved. The business documents, project management plan. At this point, just assuming that we've got some work put together, which is kind of funny because if this is an initiation, we probably haven't put these plans together, but we might have an idea what we're going to be doing with communications and stakeholder engagement. Project documents, change log, issue log, requirements. On the OPA side, or on the environmental side first, what kind of organization do we have? What's the culture of our organization? That may have some kind of either help or hindrance in figuring out who's going to be involved with this. And we probably have templates and things. And unless we're just starting a brand new company, we probably have this list of stakeholders already. So a lot of times we may be just pulling that one used for previous projects, updating it, getting it cleaned up and getting current people included. Tools and techniques. Well, our experts are going to do this. Various ways of doing it: brainstorming, having questionnaires or surveys. Stakeholder analysis is going to be this thing we're going to get into, looking at power and influence, interest that different people might have. And this will help us in classifying how we're gonna, what kind of strategies we're gonna have for various stakeholders. And we may be doing some document analysis while we're doing this. This is where we're gonna get into these matrix charts we're gonna be setting up. We'll probably do it by power and influence, power and interest, impact and influence, various kinds of grids we can do this. I haven't seen this, but I guess a 3D model would be a cool way to do this. Most of the time I've just seen, two-directional things. Salience model is going to be talking about, it's part of this too, but showing, who has the most power and influence, who could really impact us the most. And directions of influence. I thought this was interesting because I've always thought upward, downward, and horizontal maybe, but not sideward. Sideward's a new term for me in here. I've never heard sideways, sideward. Sideward influence.
Horizontal.
Horizontal influence.
That's horizontal, I guess. Yeah, but I would use horizontal. If I got other project managers that are my peers, okay, you're going to be working with them a lot, especially if we're using some of the same people.
Directors.
Sideward. Sideward. Okay. And what we're going to be doing is really prioritizing this list, looking at what are the key people we need to deal with regularly all the time, and who needs to have a little bit of information or that monthly newsletter. We'll probably use meetings to go through and strategize how we're going to do all this. Here's an example of a power and influence grid. So for power is going up this way, more powerful, and then influence to the right. Key people will be this, maybe in this case, the sponsor or the engineering manager. Okay, work with those folks closely. CFO's got a lot of power. He's not directly that involved, but we probably still need to give the CFO what they're looking for and realize that they could impact us if they were against us. Regular people, we're going to keep updating, of course, working with our team, maybe end users or engineering users. And then everybody else. Might need to keep in contact with them. And maybe these are the stockholders, need that monthly, quarterly newsletter or something. May not need to have a lot for that. And this is power and influence. We could also look at it in the other ways they mentioned it, power and interest, influence and impact. If we did influence and impact, these folks could have a lot of impact because they got a lot of power. So the outputs of this will be the stakeholder register. And as they point out, it's one of the key things. Want to make sure we've identified all the people, positions, roles that are involved, what's expected, what kind of influence they could have. And sometimes it's going to be in different phases too. Like our test managers in my world were interested in what we're doing 6 months from now, not what we're doing up front with the projects a lot of times. Although they had to do upfront planning too, but they were going to get much more involved and interested when we got down to the testing. And different ways to classify them, internal, external, what power, influence, or power or interest they have, those different things. And we'll probably try to set up too, or initially figuring out who's supporting us, who doesn't even know what we're doing, they're unaware of it, who's neutral, and who's resisting us. So we may have some updates. This is early on again here, so I'm kind of surprised to even mention these things, but some initial things probably feeding into the requirements, communication risk, and stakeholder plans. Maybe some new assumptions we came up with. Might be certain people we thought the finance manager was going to be supporting us, but he's kind of mildly against us. We want to spend too much money. So we probably have to figure out how we work with that manager. Plan stakeholder engagement. This is where we're really figuring out how we're going to deal with the various groups of people. So we want to find out, by identifying stakeholders in 13.1, we've kind of got this long list of stuff and a good bit of information on people, but now here we've got to figure out the best way to work with these different people, how much time to spend with different groups of people. And we're going to be generating the plan out of this, which is going to really hopefully help us as we're going through the project to keep engaged with these people, notice and monitor changes that come up. Go to this one. So resource management plan now, in planning stakeholder engagement, these other plans are being developed in parallel too. So resource management, communications management, risk management are happening at the same time here. So we're getting versions of those, or draft versions, as we're building on it. Bunch of documents. Stakeholder register, of course, being a key one. Agreements. Well, if we got contracts and ongoing service level agreements going on, well, those are key people, key stakeholders. Enterprise environmental factors, I listed a number of different things here. Some of the same kinds of things we've seen, but stakeholder risk appetite's probably kind of a new one. We have stakeholders that, investors that don't want us taking any chances, or investors that want us to go wild and try something new and different. How our organization's set up. Are we all co-located one place? Are we scattered around the world? How do we deal with personnel administration and their policies? On the organizational process asset side, there's probably lots of stuff we can pull up from our historical information, probably guidelines on how to set up, retrieve the information. I know we talked about this in one of my other classes. When we put together a stakeholder analysis, that's probably not something we want to broadcast to the world. Oh yeah, Bill's against us. Oh great. Or Sarah is unaware of what we're doing. That's not really something to let everyone. That's something for coffee room discussions and stuff. It should be really kind of kept, I think, pretty close to us. But it's going to help us figure out, how we're going to deal with the different people. How do we get to know stakeholders? Well, a lot of it's just good leadership, good relational characteristics, building trust and honesty, communicating well, showing interest in the other people, respect and concern for them. Empathy. I like to talk about empathy and sympathy because I think they're a lot of times kind of blurred together as being the same thing. I think with sympathy, a lot of times we're, somebody's suffering, we're crying with them, but we can't do anything to help them. But with empathy, we understand their feelings and emotions and what's going on, but are still able to do something positive to help them along. So I think there's a little bit of difference there. And then when we looked it up in the dictionary, they were kind of blurred again, but that's the way I understood it better before.
Empathy is actually you can put yourself inside in their shoes and feel the way they do so that you can totally understand where they're coming from and then you can help them.
Yeah, you get a good understanding. It's not like you're just going into the same emotions that they have and they're not able to do something.
Yeah, sympathy is more like lip service. It's like, yeah, I know how you feel and I feel bad for you, kind of. That's it. But you can empathy is like really feeling what the person.
Yeah, you're really attuning with the person.
Exactly.
Really understanding, and it's a feeling thing too, but it's not a debilitating feeling thing.
Exactly.
I can't do anything to help you. I'm so upset too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Tools and techniques. We may have some people that have special knowledge about dealing with power and politics, which unfortunately is always true in most companies and outside companies. You need to understand the culture of the company, what's going on in there. We may have some tools we can use to assess various positions where people are, figure out how we're going to communicate with the different groups. And if we've got some knowledge from previous projects too, a lot of times we're not starting with brand new people again. Probably have a lot of the same people we've dealt with before. So we can look at what we've done in the past and sometimes build on that.
One bullet is missing in our page.
One bullet?
The meetings bullet is not there in our page.
There it is. Meetings.
Meetings. Page
Oh,
174.
Is this part of that?
176.
Is this part of that 2-page handout I gave you? I think it is.
Oh, decision making?
It gave you a little handout with 2 pages on 180. Oh, is this it? No, this is earlier.
No, not yet.
Oh,
I didn't know. So on your slide,
it's missing.
it's missing meetings here.
But it's on the next.
On the printout, it's on the bottom of the next one.
It's on the next one. I think
Oh,
I.
it is on the next one. Okay. It's kind of really shuffled there. Next one.
Yeah, I think I simplified it because it was.
Okay.
I I had some redundant things in there, I believe. You might have more than you need in there. Decision-making, this is where we're gonna rate and rank the different stakeholders' influence and interest, and this is the thing too, we're not gonna broadcast to the world. Here's one of the things we can do in kind of putting the analysis together, looking at these 5 categories. They're unaware of what we're doing, don't know what the project's about or anything, how it's gonna impact them. Resistant, well, obviously, they're against us. They don't like change, they don't want this change to take place. Neutral, neutral and unaware are similar, but here they know something about the project, but are not really for or against it. Supportive, this is where we'd like to bring people to be supportive for us and help us. That's where we're going to try to do some of our strategies to engage people. Leading is great, but just like having 20 cooks or 20 chiefs, you don't want to have 20 leaders. You want to have, the sponsor, maybe the senior management, a few people to be the lead. So as we're progressing through this, we want to try to get people towards supportive. Or if they're resistant, we can bring them to neutral. That may still help us. We'll have less fights at least. Here's the chart, your assessment matrix out of PMP. I wish they had a few more people in here, but it's kind of showing the current state of these 3 stakeholders and where we desire to have them. We desire to have them in supportive. One's already supportive. Okay, let's make sure we satisfy them and keep them there. Neutral, move them that way. I'd like to see a resistor in here. They don't have a. So if the resistor was here and we could even move them to neutral, that would probably be a bonus. If we can get them supported, even better. The outputs of this will be the plan. Figuring out the desired engagement levels we want to have with our key stakeholders, scope and impact of change on these stakeholders, how we're going to communicate with them, and who needs what information and how frequent, those kinds of things, and how we're going to update our stakeholder engagement plan as we're moving along. And while we're doing this too, we probably, even putting the plan together, we probably remembered some more stakeholders, or maybe our team came up with some other people we might have missed. 13.3 is engage, manage stakeholder engagement. This is where we're communicating with the stakeholders, dealing with their needs and issues, and trying to foster, good level of involvement by the stakeholders. The old slides used to say this is the project manager's job, but I think it's really the whole team's job. Yes, we're the lead, we're the head of the project, but we really need everyone involved in it. So really, dealing with the stakeholders at different stages when appropriate, dealing with their expectations, addressing any kind of concerns and stuff they have. We have to negotiate and communicate with them what's going on with the project. And we want to try to resolve problems and issues as quickly as we can, not let them linger on, because that's kind of like a wound that is festering sometimes. That could be a problem. Key benefit of this is really trying to gain support and minimize any of the resistance against us. We're trying to meet their needs. And when we talk about needs, obviously the end user customers are probably the key ones. We want to satisfy their needs, but it could be the sponsor, maybe other groups, key leads within our company. We want to try to keep them involved too. I know they've emphasized this more about keeping them more involved with what we're doing. And some of the different ways they've even suggested is inviting them to review the documents, review the requirements, maybe even come to our status meetings. I think a weekly status meeting for some folks may be more than they don't want to bother with, but at least, finding different ways to keep them more engaged. And the more we can move the stakeholders to the positive side there, it's going to help with the success of our project a lot of times. So a bunch of things feeding in: communication, risk, stakeholder, and change management plans. The change log, issue log, lessons learned register, and stakeholder register. I think I'll mention another time or two. Lessons learned register is the lessons we've learned on this current project. The lessons learned repository would be that storage of all the older lessons from other projects and stuff that we could pull in a lot of times to help us. But here, we're building on what we did already in this one through our planning, identifying stakeholders. EEFs and OPAs are pretty much the same as they were in planning stakeholder engagement. Experts, same kind of tools and techniques that we had back in stakeholder engagement too, for the planning. Communication skills. We'll be looking at different ways of communicating with people. I think it's kind of interesting they're talking about more about formal and informal communications. And I think we talked about that in the communications section too. There's lots of formal communications, documents, web links, emails coming out, progress reports, all that good stuff.
Nobody reads them.
Exactly.
A lot of times, true, yeah.
Knowledge bases and something, nobody reads them.
Limited attention span.
Yeah, who was it was talking about? Somebody was talking about a report that they had posted and they went to see if anyone looked at it.
They should now get creative with communication and tweet them out.
Tweet them out?
That is the name of the game. That is the modern age. People will at least get to notice it.
Uh-huh.
I notice a lot of intuitive companies are doing that for updating consumers about what they
They are.
into, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's cheap advertisement
Absolutely.
or cost effective.
Cost effective. Yeah, you put a little statement in Twitter, just a little catch line or something.
And a link to,
Oh, and a link to the larger
yeah,
article or explanation or report or whatever it might be. Yeah.
In communication, they had formal, informal, went into more detail in that in the section for communication, but I think they also had verbal and written.
Verbal, written, formal, written. Yeah.
Mhm.
we-
And then there's actually one more dimension that's synchronous and asynchronous.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that actually was really important for me because for a global group, sometimes synchronous, you literally have to catch the person when they are on their computer and you can instant message them. Because
Yeah.
otherwise they're not gonna pay attention, they're not gonna answer you, they're just not interacting with the stuff that you need them to interact with. So if you ping them, they could still ignore it, but it's at least more immediate, kind of in their face.
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting in my time, when I first started Motorola, we used these little things called SkyTel pagers, which were kind of like BlackBerry in a way, I guess, but a little different. Little keyboard, little screen for typing in your stuff. And when we'd have a conference hall meeting, when everyone was in there, everyone would be sitting there going, well, eventually we changed over to these things called laptops. And the pagers disappeared. And it was the same thing then with messaging. It was one time, my friend that had worked at UPS and was working at Motorola and actually helped get me in there, was sitting at one end of the room and I was at the other end. And the head of the PMO started grilling our test manager. And the test manager was just dancing because the head of the PMO was a genius, I think. He had one sheet of paper in front of him, but he'd asked for very specific things the week before in the status meeting for the test manager to produce. He didn't do it. And rather than just saying, something like, I'm sorry, I didn't get it done. It was just kind of, well,
Step dancing.
yeah, and the PMO guy was nailing him. And my friend and I were texting or messaging back and forth because it reminded us so much of a lot of the truck managers at UPS pounding on the people. And in this case, though, he was, I think, legitimately right in what he was asking for because he had specifically requested that report or information the week before. But we did think he was a little bit more like one of our truck driving managers at that point.
So you were having a side conversation on instant message
Yeah,
while he was,
so we were
Pounding on.
IMing back and forth and whoa, yeah.
so when those pages came out, you were limited to like 48 characters. And then I think it went up to 2 lines that you could do, and then it was 4 lines, I think.
Funny thing is, if they had continued to evolve that, that could have been the next smartphone or something, but they didn't. Another lost opportunity for that company. Yeah, different kinds of skills too. Resolving conflict, being aware of cultural differences, negotiating. I like active listening. I think I mentioned that probably in the communication section too. I don't always do it, but it's a good thing to do, to really listen to a person, understand what they're thinking, feeling, being attuned with them, basically. One of the things we're going to try to do is overcome resistance to change from those that are on the resisting side. Tools and techniques. Well, in the team, I guess we saw this a little bit in resource management, because that's where the team charter was actually defined and built out. Probably has ground rules in it, how the team's going to work together. This is talking more specifically about the project team here, I think, but probably other stakeholders we might be involved with. How we're going to handle meetings. PMI is pretty clear about having meetings with very set agendas, start and end times, get the minutes out right away, any action items assigned out, and don't let it wander on like our old meetings did for 3.5 hours. Various management skills can come in here. Strategizing in the best way to engage with different stakeholders and adjusting it as we learn more. Trying to build that consensus up. Trying to, again, moving people to being supportive. And there may be some needs where we need to negotiate and figure out what's the best thing to do for the project. Outputs of this may be more change requests, updates to our plans, updates to the documents and the change log, lessons learned register, stakeholder register in particular. Maybe issue log too. I think I mentioned that issue log in my world was a little bit different than the way they define it, but it's part of what they define. So the issue log might have those big problems, big risk, this project's going to be delayed because the supplier is late. Well, that'd be an issue to have and to work through and have an owner to resolve it. But it could also be, Bill disagrees with Mary about the process. Well, it may not be the big thing of the delivery being late, but it's still an important thing that we could track and probably work with those two people through on our team and try to bring them to a good resolve.
Do you think it's nice to call people out on those?
Call out?
Bill and Mary disagree.
Well, if they come to us and say they disagree.
Yeah, but
Bill's an
it's one thing
idiot.
to say that.
Yeah.
It's another to document it.
Yeah. And again, that's another thing I don't think I'd
Could
broadcast to the world
negatively
either.
affect,
And
especially if you put in archived notes that you're gonna store.
yeah, I think it gets to the point of kind of what some of the things we talked about in managing resources and dealing with the team. If we can work together with them and resolve it, great. And maybe it just stays on the issue log and it says it's closed.
Or it says different opinions of this certain type test, whether it's needed or not.
Yeah. Yeah, we might just identify the problem. We may not always
Yeah.
come up with a good resolution where, oh, they both agree on everything now. Oh, maybe not. And that's where, win-win. It's great if we come up with a great solution that everyone agrees with. The compromise may be the best thing, saying, well, they still disagree on this, but they're willing to move forward.
Because when you start calling people out, it squashes their creativity
Yeah.
or to open up and tell you their true opinion.
Yeah. They
Stifles.
drop the trust. What was the term I was going to use? It can kill our interest in our productivity if something else. Motivation. It dismotivates and can demotivate us. We have too much conflict. PMI thinks conflict's good as far as being creative and giving you ideas, but if it's just fighting it out and we're not getting anywhere with it, that's
Right.
Yeah,
more of the
usually
problem.
that runs into an ego war, and that's then hits the fan, and that's that. So
Yeah.
best is not to let it get there.
Yeah.
So if you
Ego
put.
wars.
if
What have
you-
thought about ego wars until we had this president?
So if you write something like that in the issue log, I think, Mark, you had a suggestion, or like to write it in a way that it wouldn't cause more problems later.
Yeah,
So
we
document
don't wanna,
it very
don't be-
innocuously and then try
Yeah.
and
saying, you know,
verbally
Bill believes
work
this
out,
and Mary
yeah.
believes this, and it's a little bit different. And maybe, yeah, just talking about trying to focus on the issue and not that Bill's a jerk or Mary's.
Right, and it's about the issue,
Yeah.
not about the project.
Yeah.
And then get them to verbally talk it out
Mhm.
if possible, and
And
then
we might
document
be-
the
we might
outcome
be
of that
the-
on the issue log.
Might be the referee or the facilitator in that too, especially if they come to us with,
Mm-hmm.
are you shaking your
I
head?
don't think it should be the referee between two egos. Like,
Okay, maybe.
I would say you guys talk it out and tell me what to do, that's it. Unless you want me to bring in an expert and then duke it out, then that would be better, obviously, because then there's a third party who's kind of a little more objective and will be able to do the right solution to this, if you're willing to do that. Otherwise, I'm out of it, you figure it out, tell me.
Right.
That was one of the things that was in the ground rules of Project Charter too. Having the team resolve their issues with each other. So it shouldn't get to us unless they get stuck.
It really has to, yeah.
So what we're doing here is, there's the word monitor. We're monitoring these various stakeholder relationships and trying to tailor what we're doing now for the current situation as we're moving through the project. We want to keep an efficient engagement with our people. And so a lot of what we're going to be doing is probably reassessing what we have in the risk register and what we're looking at as far as, you know, where people were before. Were they neutral before, now they're supportive? Were they resistant, now they're supportive or neutral? We need to update our plans and how we engage with the different people. Maybe not the plans, but how we're going to deal with those people that have changed their position. Looks like a lot of the same things we had feeding into the other one, and I think it is a lot of the same things again. We got work performance information now too, and so this can give us some more things, not just what's going on with the project, but what people are doing and what level of involvement they have. Tools and techniques, and they look at some different ways of analyzing what we've got. I think stakeholder analysis makes sense. Root cause might be looking at, you know, why is the finance manager against us? What's the history there? There's something we're missing that we don't know. Alternatives, I think with that too, I mean, there's different ways we can deal with different groups of people that may be equally, or, you know, maybe one way is a better way to handle, like we were talking about, well, just with the issue of the two ego wars. We may look at different ways of, do we bring in a facilitator right away, or do we let them work through it for another week? Or if we gotta make a decision soon, you know, maybe some other ideas too.
When I was in Deloitte, they used to be very good at communication. They would actually figure out the nature of a person based on discussions with persons around that person. Like if it's a very senior person, they'll find out what kind of a mindset he has, what makes it tick and all that, and then they basically manipulate it based on that information. That's what they would do. And they were very good with it.
Yeah.
So if there were two stakeholders who were kind of at loggerheads about something and they couldn't make a decision, then they would figure out a way where they had great techniques where they would just either bring them to the table, take them out for a drink in the evening for dinner with the team, and then casually talk to them and have, you know, kind of draw them out in various ways to figure out where they're coming from and try to mitigate it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because they know that they lose the project otherwise, so.
Yeah, can sidetrack the whole project.
Exactly, yeah.
Gets
So
blown
they
up.
would find great, very creative ways of dealing with such things, and it was very impressive.
Yeah, that's good.
Communication was amazing, yeah.
Did they use social styles, like identify their primary social styles and see if that was?
Every piece of information about that person was gathered,
Wow.
every piece.
Oh my God.
So what motivated?
Here, I was-
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
Security?
the kind of drinks they like, the kind of food they like, which restaurant they like to go to.
Areas they live in, what type of dog they have.
To some extent, yeah,
How about-
do they have dogs or cats? Like,
How did they get it?
like, you know, and sometimes I'm very good at casual conversations. I'm never formal with anyone. I try to be informal. I
Yeah.
draw them out and then I figure out they have a cat or a dog or they're single or something and I get that information pretty quickly.
Mhm.
And then they would use that information and formalize it and manipulate it based on that. On that information that they got from me, because I kind of, I'm very, I mean, even people around them, I'll just say, hey, hi, and I'll be talking, and then they'll talk about something, running or something, you know, I think it's running, right, and I'm like crazy about extreme sports. So somebody is like a runner, or his son is a runner, or daughter is a runner, and there we made a contact. Then I go and tell my manager and say, you know, maybe you gotta use this information.
yeah.
Because I knew that's what they were doing, right? But I wasn't happy doing it, but the thing is, that's how it was done.
So the position I had a lot of salespeople that I interacted with.
Yeah.
And salespeople, as soon as they meet you, they work on building a profile. Are you married?
Exactly.
What is your anniversary? How long have you been married? How many
That's-
children?
Yeah,
Children's names?
yeah, statistics.
You know, what area do you live in? You know,
So that's actually selling the project, right?
and that's what they start to do, build a
Fill
profile.
the profile.
That was the most important thing in the project.
Mhm.
And people who did that, they got paid a lot more money than technical guys like me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who actually get the money from the customer, not we. We just put the bricks together, but they get the project.
Yeah.
You're the winner of the project.
Oh,
And they're the ones that interact with,
exactly. They take the
Customer.
risks.
Mhm.
you know, in a perfect world, what would you like? Oh, I'd like 6 bells and 4 whistles and, you know, whatever it is.
Exactly, yeah.
I think one of the things that's been kind of added into that profile, which may have been intuitively in there anyway, is the idea of emotional intelligence too.
Oh, for sure.
What motivates people? What's the trigger that gets them mad? And you don't want, watch out for that
The
trigger.
movies they watch, the books they read books anymore, right, you know?
Or books
So they go to
online.
help us, they
And
work-
of course,
don't
that's the reason you have even the LinkedIn profile, for example. I mean, when I go for an interview, my interview rate success is almost 95%. I sail through every interview because I go to LinkedIn, I figure out what that person is all about. If I don't get enough information, I tell the recruiter, I need to know more about this person. Tell me what you can tell me about this person. Or, you know, tell me how he's interviewing other candidates, you know, she's into other candidates.
And that's a good job search thing too, because if you have a target company you want to work for.
Yeah.
If you can identify people, maybe even people you don't know right now,
Oh, yeah, for sure, absolutely.
that can be a great way to get to know a little bit more about what's going on with those people. And maybe those are people who eventually you'll end up working with or for.
My daughter did that. I mean, of course, she did it she's into, she's not earning, she's a volunteer in the John Howard organization, which is they do prison reform policies. And so, she got rejected 3 times. And she still persisted.
Oh, wow.
Finally, he said, I might as well take you because at the end of the day, you're gonna leave. And that's how she's working there as a volunteer, not getting paid. But.
She was persistent though.
But she enjoys it, and that was a passion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm gonna get it from today. They have some.
Let's see. May go through some different ways of analyzing where different people are and what we can do to improve our relationships with them. And that stakeholder engagement assessment matrix, we're going to be updating that as we're moving along here. So those guys that were resisting us before, if they're neutral now, great. What can we do to maybe even bring them further, make them supportive of us? And has anyone slipped back? They were neutral and now they're against us. Okay, let's figure out what we're going to do with those folks. We may do some presentations, get a little feedback, I think, from people involved. These skills again for active listening, networking, showing good leadership. And I think good leadership really ties in with active listening and attuning with people and working with them closely. It sounds like your senior management folks were doing a lot of that as they were building those profiles or interests.
The most successful ones were the ones who were very active.
Yeah.
just totally listen, that's all.
Mhm.
And and the other thing they did, I noticed, was they were very anal about managing the narrative by screening our emails that went to the customer. Like, in the sense, the team, for example, we were not allowed to communicate with the customer, but those of us who were allowed, somebody would have to, the manager would have to check the email to make sure that it sounded right, you know?
Sounded right.
Like, for example, I'm the kind of person who will just say, hello, John, can you just send me this? No, hello, John, how are you?
Yeah.
How is it going to, I mean,
Mhm.
that one sentence will become one little paragraph before it gets there, basically the tone of it. And I'm very like, no wasting time, you know, like, but that was, I noticed
Yeah, it's good.
those were the things that were missing between me and getting about 50,000 more in my salary.
That's good, yeah. I know, it was funny, at one of our breaks, I got a text from a friend who's in California right now going to grad school. And we're going to talk about some book sales and stuff for a volunteer organization. And I realized we started out just talking about the thing. And so after a while I said, well, how are you? And I said, really, I'm trying to do too many things now. I'm too busy and I really need to focus just on studying right now. I said, okay, because we had already talked about talking tomorrow more in depth. I already told her I was teaching right now too. But it was the same kind of thing. I realized, how are you was actually my, not afterthought, but it wasn't my first thought.
Fifth email.
Yeah.
Or text.
Text, yeah. So the outputs of this, work performance information, maybe more change requests, updates to our plans, updates to our documents. And that's stakeholder management.
That was quick, so you're done with.
We're done with stakeholder management, yeah.
Wow.
Ready for exam
That's what I
tonight?
was doing.
No, I'm not ready for the exam.
Now ready for the exam? Well, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm gonna suggest
Tone was
they give you the
very
exam.
important.
Oh,
Take home.
yeah.
Take home exam?
Take home exam?
Exam is big word.
Why should I write on the phone?
I've got a few more things to get to, but let's see it.
That's the difference.
Yeah, I don't want to do it, it's a long question.
Did I give you the quiz?
No,
I gave you the handouts, I don't know if I gave you the quiz.
I am going to leave and then I'll pick up this one. From the,
Do we get more hands?
your YouTube.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So we will review the quiz next time. Nobody else joined us.